Today, on Guess What I Found Out, we are going to clear up one of the most confidently misused pairs of words in popular science: hominids and hominins. People use them interchangeably. Scientists cringe every time, and the actual distinction between them turns out to reveal something genuinely strange about the evolutionary family tree that produced us. Welcome to the episode where we sort out the fancy ape chart once and for all. Let us start with the word everyone has heard: hominid. Most people use it to mean a human ancestor, a cave person, something bipedal that grunted and made tools. That is not what it means. A hominid is a member of the family Hominidae, and that family includes all great apes. Orangutans are hominids. Gorillas are hominids. Chimpanzees are hominids. You are a hominid. Your grandmother is a hominid. If you have ever been to a zoo and made awkward eye contact with an orangutan, you were two hominids having a moment. Hominins, spelled with an N at the end, is the more specific term. Hominins refers to the tribe hominini, which includes modern humans and all of our direct ancestors going back to the point where our lineage split from chimpanzees. Every species on the direct path to us is a hominin. Chimpanzees are on the edge of this category, but are typically classified separately as panini, the tribe that includes chimps and bonobos. When scientists say they found a new hominin fossil, they mean they found something that was either human or closer to humans than chimps are. That is the distinction. It matters. And now you have it. To understand how we got here, we need to go back about 20 million years, which sounds like a long time until you realize the Earth is 4.5 billion years old, and we are basically a rounding error. So, about 20 million years ago, a group of Old World apes known as Hominoidea split into two branches. One branch became the Hylobatidae, the so-called lesser apes, which today includes gibbons and siamangs. The other branch gave rise to the Hominidae, the great apes, and well, that's the group we're really interested in today. Within Hominidae, the first major split separated the orangutan lineage, called Ponginae, from the rest. Orangutans, you see, went their own way. The remaining group, called Homininae, kept evolving and eventually split again. On one side, gorillas, and on the other, the lineage leading to both chimps and humans. That next split, the one between gorillas and the branch that would eventually lead to both humans and chimps, happened roughly 8 to 10 million years ago. Then, somewhere between 5 and 7 million years ago, the chimp and human lineages parted ways. And honestly, that's really where the hominin story gets started. The earliest candidate for a hominin, meaning the very first creature on our side of that split, is Orrorin tugenensis. It was found in Kenya and is estimated to have lived about 6 million years ago. What makes Orrorin particularly interesting is the evidence of bipedalism, upright walking, seen in the structure of its thigh bone. Now, we can't be entirely certain Orrorin was walking upright in quite the same way as later hominins, but the bone geometry does suggest it spent a significant amount of time on two legs. For a creature living 6 million years ago, that's really quite remarkable. Then comes Australopithecus, the genus that most people have actually heard of, partly because of a famous fossil named Lucy. Australopithecus anamensis appeared around 4.2 million years ago in East Africa. These were small-brained, upright-walking creatures with bodies that still showed significant adaptations for tree climbing. They are the fancy ape chart species that most people picture when they imagine early human ancestors, knuckles hovering just above the ground, brow ridge doing a lot of heavy lifting. Around 2.3 million years ago, the genus Homo appeared, and things started moving faster. Homo habilis was one of the earliest members of our genus, and it showed a meaningful increase in brain size compared to Australopithecus, along with evidence of stone tool use. Homo habilis still had a lot of Australopithecus-like features, enough that scientists argued for decades about whether it belonged in Homo at all, but the brain size and tool use eventually landed it in our column. Homo erectus appeared around 2 million years ago and was the first hominin to leave Africa in significant numbers. Fossils of Homo erectus have been found across Asia, from Georgia in the Caucasus to Java in Indonesia. Homo erectus had a larger brain than habilis, walked fully upright, controlled fire, and persisted as a species for nearly 2 million years, which is longer than modern humans have been around by a factor of about 25. We are, by comparison, very new. So, the weird part involves a species called Homo heidelbergensis, which lived around 640,000 years ago and is currently the leading candidate for the common ancestor of both modern humans and Neanderthals. Now, heidelbergensis spread across Africa and into Europe. The African populations eventually evolved into Homo sapiens, while the European populations evolved into Neanderthals. And for a long time, scientists treated those two groups, sapiens and Neanderthals, as entirely separate species that occasionally encountered each other. And then, well, one of them went extinct. But, you know, that tidy story fell apart when we sequenced Neanderthal DNA. It turns out that modern humans, whose ancestry traces back outside of sub-Saharan Africa, carry roughly 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA. We did not just encounter Neanderthals, we had children with them. And, amazingly, those children's descendants are walking around today, carrying genetic material from a species that has been officially extinct for 40,000 years. If your ancestry is European, East Asian, or from several other regions, you are, in fact, a little bit Neanderthal. That is not a metaphor. That is genomics. And then there are the even stranger recent additions to the family tree. Homo naledi was discovered in a cave system in South Africa in 2013, and it broke the model in almost every direction. Naledi had a tiny brain, smaller than Australopithecus in some specimens, combined with hands and feet that were remarkably human-like. Its age was initially estimated as very old, but dating eventually placed at least some Naledi populations at around 250,000 to 335,000 years ago, which means Naledi and early Homo sapiens were alive on the same continent at the same time. A small-brained, primitive-looking hominin overlapping with modern humans. The fancy ape chart just got a lot messier. Homo floresiensis, discovered on the Indonesian island of Flores, was even more surprising in a different direction. These were, well, tiny hominins, standing roughly a metre tall, with brains proportionally small even for their body size. They used stone tools, possibly hunted pygmy elephants, and persisted until at least 50,000 years ago, possibly even later. The leading explanation for their small size is island dwarfism. The same evolutionary pressure that, produces miniature versions of large mammals on isolated islands over thousands of generations. And there is also the Denisovans, a group known almost entirely from DNA extracted from a finger bone and a few teeth found in a Siberian cave. The Denisovans are genetically distinct from both modern humans and Neanderthals, lived across a huge range from Siberia to Southeast Asia, and also interbred with early modern humans. Indigenous populations in Papua New Guinea and Aboriginal Australians carry up to 5% Denisovan DNA. We know this species existed almost entirely because of what their genes are still doing inside living people today. So here is what the actual picture looks like, in contrast to the tidy linear march you probably saw in a textbook. For most of the past 2 million years, multiple species of hominin were alive at the same time. They overlapped geographically. They interbred when they encountered each other. They were not a neat parade marching from primitive to modern. They were a messy, branching, intertwining bush of related lineages, most of which went extinct, with one line, ours, eventually becoming the only surviving twig. We are not the destination of a directed process. In fact, we are the last branch standing after a very complex and, honestly, still only partially understood series of extinctions, migrations, and hybridizations. If that reframe just did something to the way you think about what you are, go ahead and like this video. That is the feeling we are chasing every week on this channel. The last thing worth noting, because it really reframes the question of what human evolution even means, is that evolution did not stop when modern humans appeared. Our species, Homo sapiens, has been changing continuously since we emerged. The mutation responsible for blue eyes arose roughly 6,000 to 10,000 years ago in a single individual and spread through populations in Europe. Lactose tolerance into adulthood is a recent adaptation that evolved independently in multiple cattle herding populations. The immune system adaptations carried by populations with long histories of specific diseases are different from those of populations without those histories. We are not a finished product. We are a work in progress, which has always been true of every species on this tree. And here is your question for this week, Curious George. Given that modern humans interbred with Neanderthals and Denisovans, and those populations' DNA is still present in living people today, do you think the species boundaries between these groups were ever as real as we treated them? Were Neanderthals a different species or just a different population of the same very widespread animal? Drop your answer in the comments and tell us how you are thinking about it. This one has no settled scientific consensus, so your reasoning is exactly what the conversation needs. Subscribe to Guess What I Found Out, because we are just getting started on the questions that actually matter, like what are we, how did we get here, and what else is out there that we have not figured out yet. Every week, without fail.